thinking about, missiles launching from, let's say, the other side of the world and hitting the other, going around the ball and hitting the other side.
Yeah.
So,
like the United States and Russia trading punches.
Right.
Yeah.
So, now for the listeners, now we're going to look at the early stages. Yeah, this was the early 60s. I know we got cruise missiles, they can say, and everything else now. Got it.
Sure.
So, did some research on it. So the rockets leave their launch pad and they adjust their trajectory to get the ballistics. They fly up to about 1,000 kilometers above the Earth.
Yep.
They reach a speed about 7 kilometers per second.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And then once they hit that speed, they cut their thrusters off, and then computers tell it what computers they had back then, based on gyroscopes, to drop the warheads down and hit the target.
Okay.
Pretty simple stuff.
Yeah, sure. We've all seen the movies with the big high arc, and then the missiles come down and rain death on everybody. Sure.
Makes perfect sense. Great. And they use radio wave control guidance systems from the ground.
Okay.
So the first thing I thought is, well, if you're curved, how far is that radio signal going to go? Considering these are on the ground, and according to some Air Force Museum site, they're only 9 feet tall, the radar system.
Okay.
But they are flying at 1,000 kilometers above the Earth, so all feasible, granted, from their perspective.
Okay.
But then let's look at the modern day. The ISS. So the ISS is 400 kilometers, a little less than half of what a missile flies at, right?
Yeah, 400 kilometers. By the way, you got to remember that some people don't know what the ISS is. So the International Space Station, which is celebrating its 20-year anniversary next year.
Yay.
Yeah, I know, right?
And it's flying at a speed of 7.6 kilometers per second. Okay. So it's a little faster. Now here's where it went, wait a minute. So if the missiles fly up at 1,000 kilometers and then shut the thrusters off and then drop the warheads when they want.
Yeah.
According to the calculations from NASA, universetoday.com and whatnot, to achieve an orbit, meaning to circle the Earth, at 500 kilometers, you have to be going at a speed of 7.6 kilometers per second. That's about what the ISS is doing. Makes sense. The greater the altitude, the less velocity is needed to maintain the orbit.
So, okay, I got you. All right, so higher the altitude, less velocity is needed. Got it.
That means those missiles flying at that speed should be maintaining an orbit, not coming back down.
Good point. I hadn't really thought about it like that. So you're saying that once the missile gets up there, it's traveling at about 17,000 miles an hour. 7 miles a second, I get it. But 17,000 miles an hour. But once it gets up to the peak of its trajectory, it's in orbit.
Right, according to how ISS works.
According to, if you believe the ISS formula, and the missiles are flying twice as high as the ISS, then once it gets up there, once it's about ready to lob back down, once it's about to fall back down on Earth, technically it's in orbital physics at that point.
Right. And even if, let's say they got the warheads on a launch pad and it's pointed down, it's in orbit and it launches the warheads down, it still has that, quote, horizontal speed going.
Right.
So how... It's one of those things where you take the two different pieces and they don't match up. They contradict each other.
Right.
Now, for the viewers and for those skeptics, this is preliminary, so if somebody else can get exact data and all that, that would be great.
Yeah.
But using a radio guidance from a 9-foot ground, if you go over a curvature, then when do you lose radio signal? If they're in a static orbit, how are they dropping down? And then the other thing I found out interesting is, and we just talked about quickly, was when the heck did they actually test to make sure a missile could go up and hit the target at a distance?
You know, that's an excellent point. And I mean, we're covering multiple things here, but let's talk about that one first. And that is, where do you test? When do you do the test? When you're doing an ICBM launch test with a dummy payload, a non-nuke, where are you dropping it exactly? Are you actually firing off an ICBM and having it land somewhere in Turkey, in the desert, and saying, oh, okay, well, at least we know the accuracy was okay? Have they ever done that?
I can't really find anything yet.
Because you have to test it on land. Testing it in the ocean's not going to do you any good, because if you're off, you're never going to find it.
Yep.
So you got to do the tests on land. I mean, we all know, it's interesting that you mention all this stuff, because we all know, and I'm one of the believers that atomic weapons, at least the technology exists, but as far as testing long-range rockets, that's more problematic, I think.
Yeah, and then there's the whole thing of, so if you're doing the initial flights with the radio guidance and all that, so doing some research on that, so radio waves in a vacuum, so take away the Earth's atmosphere, let's say it's in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It goes about 185 miles per second.
Right.
So if you're talking 2,000 miles distance, right?
Yeah.
Before it hits, so that's what? 20-second delay, almost? 10-second delay?
And then, I mean, we're talking at those speeds, 20 seconds is a long time when it comes to those speeds. 20 seconds is a long time if you're firing a torpedo, let alone a rocket that's traveling at that speed. So how in the heck are you making course corrections accurately?
Right.
And with what technology are you doing it? You're trying to punch through, again, you're talking about a lot of different things, but I think they're all valid, which is you're using radio technology to guide this thing in. How are you doing this over the curvature of the Earth, if you believe in the curvature? How are you doing it in Russian airspace? How are you guiding that sucker in Russian airspace? Pinpoint accuracy within half a mile. Even half a mile off is considered a miss, technically. But at least you can get away with it if the yield is big enough. So how are you guiding that sucker in? And moreover, I think the point which we didn't gloss over, but we haven't really touched on it yet, is that when it gets to the top of its arc, what thrusters is it using to punch back down towards the Earth?
Absolutely none. Because from a Britannica article, and like I said, quick research of over the last, day or two we've been doing this. I've been checking this out. But it says, let's see here. I gotta find it real quick. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I mean, technically, I know where you're going with this, and that is, there's a reason why it's called a ballistic missile, which is...
Here's the sentence. Given these calculations, the guidance system can issue a command to the missile thrust system during boost phase to place the payload at a specific point in space on a specific heading at a specific velocity, which is the 7 kilometers per second or whatnot when it hits that point. At which point, thrust is shut off and a purely ballistic flight path begins.
How in the world are they getting that sucker down? You cannot tell me that gravity, whatever you want to call it, alone you can get pinpoint accuracy. And not only that, but since it's using orbital physics at that point, how are you getting that sucker back down? Because you've literally just put it into orbit. How are you now taking it out of orbit that fast? And I think it was your point we talked about earlier, which is even if you are trying to take it out of orbit, it takes time to take it out of orbit.
Right. So it's got to come down from 1,000 kilometers up.
Yeah.
Trying to stay at that orbital speed to hit New York.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. There's so many things wrong with this. I absolutely agree with you, though. I think they're all great points. So anyone out there listening to this, look up intercontinental ballistic missiles, otherwise known ICBMs, and starting from the 50s until now, because I know they're still there. I mean, they say, oh well, there's not that many in the ground anymore, but they still have a huge budget for them. So what exactly? And not only forget about just the ground-based systems, the sub-based systems. Same thing applies.
Right. Yeah.
They're using smaller versions of it, but they've still got them.
Shorter distance, yes. But now remember too, what's so important about the Atlas missile?
Yeah.
It's what carried the space missions up.
Right. Right. Awesome. That's great, man.
So
That's freaking fantastic. All right. Again, that's great stuff. I love it. It's just more nails in the coffin, more plot holes.